Now, let us embark on a reflective quest that goes to the very core of our cognition. And may I start with a deceptively simple yet tediously difficult question. And the question is whether free thinking is at all possible. Because this query goes to the very heart of our reason, our consciousness, and our agency. It's fundamentally important that we discuss it. And may I also begin with the incoherence of the proponents of free thinking. So let's start with defining the term, what it is, and who are the proponents of it, and what do they want you to achieve through the philosophy of free thinking. Now, the proponents are mostly irreligious people, atheists, agnostics, proponents of scientism, and they are the ones who would have you believe to break free from the shackles of the tradition and think whatever you want to think, because you are a free thinker. But these are the same people who would always and also have you believe that there is no agency, there is no higher being, and the advancement of the science in past few centuries, not just the science, also the scams under the pretext of science, Darwinian evolution being one of them. And not just the scams, I mean the actual advancements as well. Progressively and incrementally, they've been infused by the idea of scientific reductionism, and there's a lot of mechanistic approach that pretty much underpins the contemporary understanding of science and rationality. So the biology reduces to chemistry, chemistry reduces to physics, and somehow we have some laws in the universe that are responsible for running the operation of the universe, and those laws somehow came into existence by some other naturalistic process that no one knows how, what, where. But based on that lack of knowledge, they are very sure that it wasn't God, by the way. So this is where the incoherence of it goes to a next level, where they would want you to believe that all of it is reductionable to the states of the atoms, and you don't go beyond that, because beyond that is metaphysics, and so far as scientific reductionism is concerned, it does not entertain metaphysics. So it will keep you to the materialistic, mechanistic world. So all the interpretation that you have of the world, it is based on whatever your brain tells you to. And here is the problem. If you want to believe that your interpretation, the worldview that you have assumed and created along the way, it is just a mere product of your brain, because that is exactly what reductionism is, then you are bound by it, then you cannot think freely. And the reason you cannot think freely is because for you to be able to determine whether your brain cells and neurons are giving you the right information, you need to have an internal agency, an agency within yourself that is going to independently examine the produce of your brain. Does that make sense? And both things cannot happen simultaneously. If it is just atoms and cells and neurons, then there is no free thought, because everything is determined on that. So everything that affects you, metaphysically speaking, it is just a reaction and a product of whatever happens in your brain. But to be able for you to know if that is right or wrong, you need to have something which is independent of your thought to make that examination. But that cannot happen because that doesn't exist. Well, if that doesn't exist, then how can you have free thought? But apparently they believe that both of them are not only right, but they are true. So the case I present to you is that free thinking is possible, absolutely, but it has very tight limitations. And it has limitations because whatever we think, it comes from certain worldview. It is true that you can create your own worldviews, but those worldviews also will come from certain pre-existing premises. So it is not that you cannot think freely, of course you can. But free thinking is limited to your own worldviews. You will always be enslaved to certain thoughts. You will always be enslaved to certain ideas. Just to give you an idea, people who think that free thinking is a great thing and you can be a free thinker, and I'm sure they can be, but problem they have is that when they go to the schools, particularly in the US where we are taught evolution, within those educational institutes, they are not free to think that evolution is not the right idea. And that is just at the school level. You go all the way to some high-speaking, high-level evolutionary biologist, you still have the same problem. Imagine an evolutionary biologist first time coming across a new piece of fossil. What do you think the first thought that will cross his mind, or her mind for that matter? Evolution? That's it. And the second question, where do I fit this piece of fossil in the overall paradigm of evolution or the fossil record? Why? Because that person is not free to think that there could be an alternative explanation. That paradigm is already settled. So you have to live within that paradigm. And same applies to the religious people, same applies to the philosophers, same applies to everyone. So the point we are making here is that the free thinking is always going to be confined to your own worldviews. Problem with the proponents of materialism and free thinking, people who want to take this simultaneously, problem with them is that they want you to think that whatever interpretation your brain is giving you is just a result of a mechanistic process. So there is no soul, there is no agency, and you are bound by whatever your brain is telling you. And by the way, you are free to think that this is the case. So in other words, what they do is they invite you to think freely that you are a robot. Welcome to the world of mechanistic science and free thinking. And that would be a bigger problem for them. So this is a huge incoherence there. And then there is a problem of infinite regress as well. Now, this part is somewhat technical. I will try to make it as easy as I can for myself as well. But please go along the journey. If we miss out on something, we will have a Q&A session in the end. We will discuss it in some detail. Aristotle is quite right in pointing out that when we create a deductively constructed argument, the fundamental or foundational premises don't require prior reasoning, which is to say that the premises that you use, they will not be created through your reasoning. They are going to be there. Because if they're not there, then you will hit infinite regress, which is to say that, well, where do you stop? So one thing examines the other, and that examines the other, that examines the other. So for example, if you hold an ontological view today, for you to be able to know if this view is true, you will need to examine that. So what is to be examined by why is it and how is it. So your ontology, the quality of your ontology will be determined by the quality of your epistemology. So your epistemology will take your ontology to meta-ontology. But then how do you know your epistemology is getting it right? So you will have to take your epistemology to meta-epistemology. But then how do you know that the results your brain is producing now are just and fair? So what do you do with your meta-epistemology? Do meta-epistemology? You see, once you are in that, on the train of infinite regress, there are so many carriages, they don't just finish. So there has to be some kind of first pre-existing axiom based upon which you create your entire intellectual construction. Otherwise, you will get lost. Just like 2 plus 2 is 4, we all know that. 2 plus 2 is 4. But 2 plus 2 is 4 as the information was there before even we could think that 2 plus 2 is 4. We didn't create that. We just found that out. And based on that, then we create all those intellectual processes and the mathematical systems and whatnot. So we need to have a first axiom, and that is not the result of your free thought. So your thoughts are always going to be enslaving you. So we don't have the freedom to think that we can think this or cannot think that. But it doesn't mean that we don't have free thinking at all. I'm not presenting that case. My case to you is that free thinking is a possibility, but you are free to think, am I going to be enslaved by this system or by that system? That is your choice. But once you have joined a system, then you will have to go with it. That system can come into existence based on your culture, your religion, your scientific views, your philosophy, whatever it is. But it is going to be there, always. So yes, absolutely, you can be free to think which system is going to govern your thoughts, but you don't challenge once you are in there. Lastly, because we are short on time and Sheikh also has to go to other places, and we have his lecture and then we have Q&A. So in the end, I just want to finish on one note, and then I'll leave the stage. And that is that, you know, in one of the arguably presented greatest work by Friedrich Nietzsche, thus spoke Zarathustra, I'm referring to. Right. Kindly make your talk bilingual. We have both kinds of audience in Urdu and in English, but you have to give me this in instruction in English. Okay. All right. Okay. हम मैं आई सर ये आखिरी हिस्सा जो है इसको हम उर्दू में डिस्कस कर लेते हैं कि thus spoke Zarathustra. I'll say it in English, then we'll translate it in Urdu. He came up with this idea of man and Superman, and he realized along the journey of Zarathustra that there were people who were in between, the people he heard screams of. Those people were somewhere in between the status of man and Superman. So they were sort of bridges. And he thought we can get them together and we can create Superman, superhuman, right? Ubermensch. We can create that. That's a great idea. So along the way, he met so many different people, kings with their donkeys, what he called Qaiser. And then there was a drunken song that they were dancing on and so forth and doing a number of other things. And there were people who he got together from different walks of life and put them together. And he wanted to emancipate those people from the tradition and say that now you can think freely and you can become a superhuman, a Superman, Ubermensch. Fantastic idea. Problem with this is the next day when he saw those people there with the king's arse or the king's donkeys, they were all worshipping and praying to their donkey. And he thought, that failed. So he's criticizing the idea that when you get people together and you get them to think, very soon they make these cults. But he was okay with it, that we can make some progress. At least they are now together. They are not independent. That's all fantastic. But problem with the entire structure is, and I'm very sure Nietzsche did not foresee this. He did not see this coming, that the Nietzsche himself became that king's donkey and his followers started to worship him. So the whole idea of thinking free is reversed because the person who is telling them to think freely, everybody has become enslaved to his own ideas.